Hey.
Madam Chairwoman.
Hello.
Hi, Danielle. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good to see you.
Hello, all. So many familiar faces.
I know, right? So I think we are live, correct?
Yes, we are live.
Okay, so given the fact that we have quite a healthy and hefty agenda today, I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Do we have quorum? Can you tell?
Yes, I believe we have quorum.
Okay, hey, Ashley, you helping us out today? All right, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so with that said, I will, it is 10 o'clock. I will call the Human Resource Appointment and Equity Committee meeting to order. Today is July 13th, and it's 10 o'clock. Council Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Calling the roll, Ms. Brown. Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones is absent at the moment. Mr. Miller.
Here.
Ms. Conwell.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Okay, excellent. Is there any public comment?
No, Madam Chair, no one submitted any public comment.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the June 30th, 2020 meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
Then second by Ms. Conwell. If there are no questions, comments, or concerns, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Excellent. Okay, moving on to matters referred to the committee. Council Clerk, will you please read it out into the record?
Resolution number 2020-0139, confirming the county executive's appointment of various individuals to serve on the Cuyahoga County Citizens Advisory Council on Equity for the term 7/15/2020 to 7/14/2025.
All right, thank you very much. And as a housekeeping matter, I'm just going to ask if everyone who is not speaking will please mute their phones. I'm going to turn it over to the director, Michelle Pomerantz, if you'll please give us a little bit of background.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. The Citizens Advisory Council on Equity shall first be appointed in October of 2019 and once every 5 years thereafter to obtain community input on the full range of equity issues in Cuyahoga County and as an ad hoc basis as be as necessary to support the work of the Equity Commission and or Human Rights Commission. It shall be composed of 9 to 15 citizens appointed by the executive and confirmed by council. And we are, on behalf of the county executive, are pleased to include the 15 names that are listed here. And I can go through those names, but I believe every one of them is also on the call or on the Zoom. But those names include Sheila Wright, Eddie Taylor, Danielle Sydney, Cordell Stokes, Victor Ruiz, India Pierce Lee, Marsha A. Maccabee, Randall Mcshepherd, Phyllis Harris, Dr. Heidi Gullit, Habiba Rashid Grimes, Janice Contreras, Rabbi Joshua Caruso, Stephen Cavanis, and Reverend Kenneth Chalker.
All right, thank you very much. Before we even move forward, I just want to start with a few remarks relative to this body. Last week, the council unanimously passed legislation declaring racism as a public health crisis. This declaration addressed several categories where the lives of Black people have been disproportionately impacted by structural, systemic, and institutional practices and policies. The categories that were covered included healthcare, the criminal justice system, access to healthy foods, safe and affordable housing, economic opportunities, quality transportation, education, and safe places to be active. The effects of racism has permeated practically every aspect of our lives. Therefore, I anticipate this work will be intense and demanding. As nominees being considered for appointment today, I cannot emphasize enough the importance of the task you are undertaking, as the executive has put a tremendous amount of trust in your ability to provide recommendations and input regarding the development of equity goals, strategies, and programs to address a problem that has existed before any of us were alive. There will be times where this work might be uncomfortable, confrontational, and maybe controversial. As a result, I anticipate this work will be hard, but very helpful to making our county a healthy and prosperous place for all of its citizens. As Ms. Pomerantz listed, there are several familiar names, some of whom I've had the distinct pleasure of working with on this very topic in other venues. Given the recent attention relative to the topic of racism and equity, coupled with your affiliations with organizations that have been addressing this subject long before it has become popular, I have no doubt many of the candidates before us are in high demand. Consequently, my concern is everyone's ability to commit the time, effort, and energy I anticipate this work will require, as I understand some of our candidates today have already had to rearrange their busy schedules to be considered. And while your willingness to serve is appreciated, I am urging you to strongly evaluate your ability to commit the time and attention necessary to keep this initiative moving forward, because this work is long overdue and we cannot afford any delays or diversions. Therefore, if you are unable to give this the time it deserves, then I am respectfully requesting you consider withdrawing your recommendation. Otherwise, knowing many of you have been working on addressing this subject by way of your organization's equity, racial, and/or social justice advocacy and initiatives, I expect this group to hit the ground running. With that said, today we are going to be doing things a little differently. I think it's important for the public to know that this committee has been provided with each nominee's resume, application, and/or cover letter. Traditionally, we would ask you to give us your background and why you desire to serve in this capacity. Given the number of candidates before us, I'm going to take a personal point of privilege and break from that tradition and ask that you be prepared to answer a series of 5 questions, and then I will open it up to the committee for additional questions. After you have given your responses, you will be free to leave the meeting. Although if you're able to stay, it might be helpful to gain some insight and perspective about the individuals you will be working with on this very monumental task. So with that said, I will open it up to my colleagues if they have any questions for Director Pomerantz.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilman Miller.
Thank you very much. And I would just like to make a comment on how tremendously significant it is to get this distinguished committee up and running. I had the privilege of working with my colleague, Ms. Conwell, as the original sponsors of the equity plan legislation that we passed in 2012 that initially set up this commission. So it's really satisfying to see this finally being implemented, and I commend the administration on the very high quality of the applicants that they've been able to put together, and I do share the chairperson's concern that that these are very capable and therefore very, very busy people, and that if they are in fact able to prioritize this effort and give it the time and attention it deserves, I think the impact of this work will be truly transformative for Cuyahoga County, and I particularly look forward to this commission hopefully uncovering areas in the normal course of business of Cuyahoga County government, or the normal discourse of life in the county as a whole, that may have equity issues that we may not even have previously considered, and I hope that that the committee will cast a wide net and bring forth some new ideas that we had not previously considered. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Miller. Are there any additional questions, comments, or concerns from the committee with regards to Ms. Pomerantz? All right, there being none, our first candidate, if you'll read that I'm sorry, I do know that we may have to go a little bit out of order today. I think the rabbi may have been first. So Rabbi Joshua Caruso, if you are here, are you
I'm
present?
here,
Okay, excellent.
present.
So if you'll please start with your name and the organization you represent.
Hello, my name is Rabbi Josh Caruso, and I am both organizations, Anshe Chesed Fairmount Temple, which is a Reformed Jewish synagogue in Beechwood, and Greater Cleveland Congregations, which was founded about 9 years ago here in Cleveland.
Okay, and how did you learn about the position?
I was contacted by County Executive Budish and very honored to be considered.
Okay, and how much time are you prepared to commit to this committee?
This is important work to me. It's the work that I've given to my rabbinate outside of the bread and butter of what I do as a rabbi in terms of life cycle events and leading worship and doing all the things that a clergy person does, as my colleague Reverend Chalker knows. We have discretionary time. We choose to spend it in the ways that we believe, really stoke our passions. As a co-founder of Greater Cleveland Congregations, the largest faith-based civic voice in Northeast Ohio, it has been my aim to bring a greater amount of justice to our community through civic voice.
Okay, and so given that, what unique skills, perspective, or experience do you think you bring to the table to effectively address racism?
For me, in my 19th year at Fairmount Temple now, I've come to know a number of the institutions in town and built a number of relationships in town. And it's been an opportunity to really get to know the landscape. I'm humble enough, hopefully, to know that I have not uncovered every stone, and I don't know how everything operates. But I do know that my colleagues in this group, I think we all can complement each other very well for this work. I bring the force of my faith with me. If I may, there's a verse in the book of Deuteronomy that inspires me. In Hebrew, it's tzedek tir dof. In the book of Deuteronomy, it means justice shall you pursue. And the great sages of old examined every word of the Torah, and they said that there's not one word that's superfluous in the Torah. So then, of course, they ask, why justice twice? Why do you say justice shall you pursue? And the sages say that the first justice is for the systems of law, but the second justice is for those fallible and imperfect leaders, ourselves, who try to execute the law as best to our ability. But we have noticed, and we know we're blind if we don't see it, that both justices are not in harmony. There is disharmony between the justices of the execution of law and the justices that we practice every day. And the racial microaggressions that we practice each and every day, each one of us, in striving to beat back racism, anti-Semitism. It's in us. And the first step is recognizing our own racial and racist tendencies, no matter what color we are. No matter what our station is in life. So for me, it's recognizing with some kind of humility that we each have to strive to be a greater force for justice in this world. And then once we could kind of tend to our own personal garden, then we can do the really hard work of breaking down some of the systemic injustices that are happening in our communities.
Thank you. And finally, what would be your top 2 priorities based on the legislation and why?
Well, in the immediate, as the impacts of the pandemic are growing, and it would seem that we would be blind if we didn't try to tackle the great racial inequities that are impacting people of color. So I would say, first off, is taking on COVID-19. Figuring out how we can greater address that in our city and our county. And I would say, second of all, our schools. I live in the Shaker School District, and we know that while my children, who are white and Jewish, go to school parallel with people of color, that they don't share many of the same classes with those people of color. And so while the Shaker system could say that it lifts itself up as a diverse school system, unfortunately, it's not an integrated system. as it should be. And I know we have a school superintendent who's working on that. But those are the two big issues: education and health in our communities that I'm striving for. And GCC has been working on our Color of Health initiative. So that's pretty close to me.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll open it up to the committee for any additional questions. Going once, going
Madam
twice.
Chair, Madam
Yes.
Chair, I'm not on the committee, but I have a
No, but
question.
welcome, Councilwoman Simon. Please proceed.
Thank you so much. I wanted to, good morning to all the panelists. Thank you so much. And thank you, Madam Chair and the executive. I have a question for the rabbi. If you recall, we had met during the GCC organized opposition to the Q deal. Do you remember that?
I do.
And as part of that discussion, I had asked that you and your organization take a real listen and deep dive into what the county council's role was in the deal, and that perhaps there be a step back to understand and listen to us. I'm not sure that happened. And I'm wondering, you as a potential person to serve on this esteemed role, if you're able to work with the county council, if there is something that you oppose that you believe it is, in opposition to what the county's presenting or would like to proceed with, how are you going to respond to that? I mean, what we recall are empty chairs, and many of us recall that. I want to know how you would perform in this role if you have a different view of that of the majority of the council members or administration.
Sure. I think disagreements occur all the time. I hope we have a common respect for each other's differences and how we manage them. I still stand by every action that I took as a co-founder of Greater Cleveland Congregations, and how we. So we may have differences, Councilwoman Simon, on how all that went down, but I stand by the decisions we made.
Do you think you could work with council and the administration in the event there is a disagreement on how to proceed with a policy?
I hope so. That's the goal. That's the hope. I think of all people who personally called me County Executive Budish, wouldn't have done that if he didn't think I was capable of working with the council.
Do you think you're capable?
I do. I hope you
Okay.
have the same confidence.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate it. I just had to ask those questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
No, thank you, Councilwoman Simon. Very good questions. Are there any other questions, comments, or concerns from the committee?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilman Gallagher.
Thank you, ma'am. To go a little further into Councilwoman's concerns, this is an advisory committee. Ultimately, the final decision, as was with the Q, resides with the council and the administration. So I'm not really concerned if there is some sort of disagreement within the committee or the committee itself with the direction in which the council and the administration decide to go. Advisory is advisory. This isn't set in stone, and that's the way it should be.
Thank you, Councilman Gallagher. Any additional questions, comments, or concerns?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilman Jones.
Yes, Madam Chair. And this may be more for you or the administration, but when it comes time to make reports or to provide the advice, will it be presented to both administration and council? What is the process for the sharing of their conclusions?
Yes, Council.
Recommendations.
The recommendations are to be provided to both council and the executive.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any further questions for the rabbi or regarding the rabbi's nomination? All right. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you for your time. We're going to move on to our next candidate. It is going to be,
Thank you.
You're very welcome. It is going to be Mr. Victor Ruiz, I believe, who also has a prior obligation. So Mr. Ruiz, you are up. If you will please unmute yourself, start with your name and your organization and how you learned about the position.
Good morning, Victor Ruiz. I am Executive Director of Esperanza, and I was contacted by County Executive Budish.
Okay, and what unique skills, perspective, and expertise do you think that you bring that will effectively address racism?
Thank you. My entire career has been devoted to addressing inequities, primarily in the educational sector. So doing the deep work and the deep dives with systems that intentionally and unintentionally create environments that are not just inequitable, but also racist in nature. That's the work I've been doing. And I know that we live in a time when we're looking at it from an intersectional perspective, that we need to look at all aspects. So my experience dealing with, again, systems and policies and practices will be helpful to this group.
And what would be your top priorities based on the legislation?
A couple things. One,
Top two.
yes, sorry, to a deep dive into the data, and more importantly, present it in a way that is transparent and easy to understand for all citizens in Cuyahoga County. I think it's important to know what it's really going on, and then also understanding the county policies and practices that are racist.
Okay, and then how much time are you prepared to commit for this work?
This is really important to me, and I am committed to participating 100%. So I will commit what is necessary.
All right, I will open the questions, open it up to my colleagues for questions. Councilman Jones, you have a question?
Yes, Madam Chair. More of a comment. I appreciate the comment about the systemic racism. We see it constantly, at least those impacted, African Americans in particular, I'd say, but it certainly is something visible to all. It certainly needs to be addressed. I've come to be able to verbalize that good people can still be guilty simply by our silence. When we say nothing, the system itself will continue on as is, producing the results that are not positive. So actively pushing back against that system is required really by everyone. I felt the time being on council, I've been vocal, but sometimes in relief to myself, I look at moments when I said I could have spoken up when I didn't. And that's just a self-evaluation that anyone can make. So systemic racism is an issue, clearly. And if this body sees it and identifies it within county government, you certainly be doing a great service to this county. We may need to, one, start to share even offline with this body the work that each council person has done in regards to racism and how we've tried to address its negative impacts. So this should be an ongoing conversation. And I would say to all of the candidates that I think it's fair to say our doors are open. All of our doors are open to you. So you have both branches of government, the administration you can come to with your hopes and your concerns. Both branches, both equally, separate but equal. We have had a good partnership, but you do have both branches that you can and should be coming to when you have a hurdle or challenge that you're concerned about. So again, I hope you avail yourselves and take advantage of the open door policy that both branches provide.
Thank you, Councilman Jones. Any additional questions, comments, or concerns from the committee? Going once.
Madam Chair.
Yes. Councilman Miller.
Madam Chair, to Mr. Ruiz, thank you very much for your willingness to serve and your dedication and prioritization. And my question is about process. What do you see the advisory committee doing in the way of reaching out to the community and getting broad input from citizens, and how might your ability to do that be affected by COVID-19, and how would you adapt to that set of circumstances?
Thank you, Councilman Miller. I'll start with that. I think one of the things that working remotely has brought out is that A couple of things. We do have a digital divide in Northeast Ohio, so that reaching everyone via tools like Zoom is not possible. However, my organization has looked at other ways, such as direct phone calls, text messaging, social media. So utilizing all the tools that we have to gather information is critical. So that's one way of engaging the community, is through surveying, also focus groups for those who can participate. And then when we are able to meet in person, meeting in the community. But I think one of the mistakes we've made is that we limit the location. So we have to go to all aspects of the community, all corners, no matter how large or small the groups are, so that we can get as broad of feedback as possible.
Madam Chair, to Mr. Ruiz, I think I chose the right person to ask this question. It sounds like you really have a very good handle on grassroots interaction, and I just really encourage you to bring that. You certainly sound very capable, and if you go out and get a lot of input, I think the work will be better. And while we're talking about that, I'll just share an experience that I had when I was working with the county charter commission, and rather than simply setting up a forum where everybody piled into the same room and you had people address the whole crowd, we broke up into a small group World Cafe format, and had a number of groups dive into the specific amendments that we were talking about, and we got a greater amount of input, and some of it found its way into the final product. And so I would encourage you to be creative in the way that you organize the meeting processes, and use a variety of different formats and see what you get.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Miller. Are there any other questions, comments, or concerns from the committee members? Well, Mr. Ruiz, I thank you for your willingness to serve in this capacity, and I echo Councilman Miller's sentiments with regards to your input and feedback. With that said, we are going to move to our next candidate, Mr. Cavanis. Mr. Cavanis, if you are present.
Yes.
All right. Good morning. If you will state your name, the organization you're with, and how you learned about the position.
My name is Stephen Cavanis. I'm with Team Neo. I'm a director of project management there. I learned of the position through County Executive Budish.
Okay, and I wanted to know, what unique skills, perspective, and expertise do you bring that you think will effectively address racism?
So I think, at least one of my experiences working with Congresswoman Fudge's office, I was able to engage public officials at the highest level. One organization, one commission was able to engage around redlining. And I would say, while that wasn't, publicized, I think that engaging at the highest level with our public officials and bringing our citizens in those rooms and having a constructive conversation, I think can lead to sort of incremental change. I think we need to go further than that, though. And so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to join this committee, because I truly think that us as advisors can really dig into some of these uncomfortable conversations that I know most of the folks on this committee, that everyone is willing to have. and challenge each other. And so I know everyone is up to that challenge as well as myself.
Excellent. And the two priorities based on the
So
legislation.
so I would say procurement. I think we need to really look into that and that process. And then as well as our justice system. So those two.
Okay, and relative to the time commitment, how much time do you anticipate you'll need to give to this committee?
I mean, I can at least give 2 hours a week. I will give more as needed. So this is something I'm passionate about and something that needs to happen. And I commend the county executive, the council for even making this opportunity available.
Excellent. I do, as mentioning county, as you say, county executive, I do see that he has come into this committee. He has joined us. I will take just a moment of personal privilege to put a pause if any of our council members have questions, and welcome County Executive Budish. And if you'd like to share a few words, Mr. Budish.
Sure, thank you. Can you hear me? Am I off mute?
You are, we can hear you.
I can never tell. I just wanted to come by and first of all, thank you and the other council members for creating and promoting this committee. It's part of what you all have been working so hard on, the racism as a public health issue resolution. It's very important work, as you have noted in your opening remarks. And I have to say, I wanted to also thank all the people on this call, all the people who have agreed to put their names into nomination to serve on this committee. It's in my time on the in the county government, I don't know that I've seen a more really great group of people that have offered to provide their time and hard work to a very important purpose. So I just wanted to thank everybody, and I don't mean to interrupt your flow of the meeting. Please go ahead, and I'll just, I've been watching, and I wanted to stop by and say thank you.
Well, thank you, County Executive. It certainly is a privilege to have you here, and appreciate you stopping by. I'm going to return back to the order of the meeting and open it up to the committee or any of my council colleagues if you have any questions for Mr. Cavanis with regards to his nomination. Going once and going twice. All right.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I had the mute button on.
Okay, go ahead. Councilman Jones has a question or comment. Please proceed.
Okay.
You have the floor.
Thank you. Again, thank you again, Mr. Cavanis. I've had a chance to work with you over the years, so I'm glad to see you're amongst the ranks here. One, your concept of your background with redlining, I think that's important. One thing you should know here that we've worked on in the county is we had a $50 million demolition fund. We know the impact redlining has had in the community. The lack of access to capital has led to, over the generation, just a deterioration in the housing stock, in the commercial buildings that line the commercial streets of particularly the east side of Cleveland, and again, those redlined areas. We've worked and provided things like demolition over the last 5 or 6 years, $50 million worth. And now currently we are holding the bank depositors of our county tax dollars accountable to provide access to capital. Key Bank is our partner, and we are currently working right now to see that they have a stronger impact on providing access to capital to those traditionally redlined communities. So you may find that an area of interest as well. Your designated interests of procurement and justice reform are certainly spot on and worthy. In terms of procurement, I'll share with you just so that the entire body knows, and you may have read in the paper, we just had a $30 million contract awarding to rehabilitate or rehab county buildings to make them more COVID protected. And in that, it's certainly important for you to look at how the bidding process was even laid out, the policy and programming that may have been before any of us ever worked at the county, any administrative staff, the underpinnings, the groundwork of how individuals are selected. It may have been prepackaged. Those are the type of things that held no one guilty of the outcomes, the negative outcomes we got. But again, part of the system, how the contracts were awarded, how they were weighted, and who was capable of winning the contract. Those type of things are, again, systemic, that need to be looked at. And just to, again, addressing the concerns in terms of procurement. You'll see we have our racial disparity study as well, which has been measuring the county's effectiveness in giving out contracts as well. So there's a wealth of things for you to dig into in terms of this work. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you, Councilman.
All right,
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilman Miller.
Madam Chair, to Mr. Cavanis, thank you very much for stepping up to this important responsibility. And just wanted to suggest a couple of areas where I think that with your background at Team NEO, that you might be particularly well positioned to be of service to the committee. And the one is in the area of entrepreneurship and the whole range of capital and other technical assistance around new business startup, and the second being the digital divide and other technological divides generally, and how we can narrow the gaps that exist in those areas. So I commend those to you, and thank you very much for stepping up.
Thank you. I mean, I'm certainly willing to engage with different topics as needed. I just want to be a value add to this process and to the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions, comments, or concerns from my colleagues for Mr. Cavanis? If there are none, we will move on. Thank you, Mr. Cavanis, for your willingness to serve in this capacity. We'll move on to our next candidate, Mr. Reverend Chalker. Reverend Chalker, if you are present, please unmute yourself. Please state your name for the record and the organization you represent and how you learned about the position.
I am, can you hear me?
Yes,
all right?
You're good, yes.
All right, I'm Ken Chalker. I've been a part of the Cleveland community since 1986. I am the former pastor of the First Church Cleveland and then University Circle United Methodist. And I heard about the position from a call and conversation with Mr. Budish, and I'm honored to be asked to be a part of this process, and appreciate the opportunity to be a part of it today.
Excellent.
I am a retired person, by the way, and but greatly involved in the life of the city through several boards and agencies, continuing in that process now.
Okay, so being retired, is that one of the unique skills and expertise you think you can lend to this project to help effectively address racism?
Well, it certainly allows me to be more in charge of my time, and I am grateful for that.
Okay, and so given the legislation that I'm sure you've reviewed, what would be your top 2 priorities?
Well, one of them would be probably one of the agencies of which I'm a part now is Children and Family Advocates of Cuyahoga County, which is associated voluntarily or associated with the juvenile court system. There are over 3,000 kids involved in the juvenile justice system in some way in their families in Cuyahoga County, and 97% of them are African American people. And there are no, the amount of Caucasian folks involved in helping young people is a significant problem. The amount of African American people helping those kids is a significant problem. And I see the disparities in justice, the justice program, as one of the great priorities and things we must talk about, and how we make that issue credibly known throughout the county. The other priority for me would be the and this is an ancillary of that. I've been involved with the Department of Justice in terms of the DOJ with the consent decree in Cleveland, and the understandings of how people can access that process, be aware of what to do with systemic concerns that they see. And I think that is another issue that we need to continue to highlight and make known in our community so that we have advocates in the right place at the right time, focused on these issues so that they don't get lost and put on a shelf.
Well, thank you very much. You mentioned the consent decree, which is can be a contentious subject as it relates to organizations like Black Lives Matter, understanding that many of the things that have been outlined on that consent decree have not been executed. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges or what has prevented that work from being done and accomplished?
Well, one of them is a lack of just that people aren't hearing about it. It is not top of mind on the minds of too many folk, and certainly of, in my anecdotal perspective, certainly not on the minds of too many white people in our community. And I think strong advocacy and making those issues known is critical. There are just too many people who don't give a damn. And it's so frustrating and heartbreaking that we continually have to put these issues before folks in ways that they will understand, or not understand, but be willing to at least listen. And I see that as one of the great problems, that people are just unaware of what's been taking place. It was front page news for weeks and weeks and weeks. And over the past years, it has become, there's been a deafening silence.
Okay, so with that said, I will open it up to my council colleagues. If you have any additional questions, comments, or concerns for Reverend Chalker, now's the time. You can unmute yourself. It looks like Councilman Jones, you are unmuted. Do you have a question, comment, or concern?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One, I'd just like to thank you, Reverend Chalker, for being a part of this process, and your input, I believe, is invaluable. And I don't say this in any way in contradiction to the comments you've made. I accept them wholeheartedly. But I will say this from my perspective as an African American. I have been encouraged by what I've just seen on the news across this nation, from America in general, who has seen the heartache and pain of the African American community, and it certainly isn't everyone, and I can even put a percentage, but if I would say a third was not in support and 2/3 were, I have no idea, but I know that it's a significant number, that we've seen a shift in the critical mass, a tipping point where America, and even corporate America, has stepped up and shown a concern for that Black Lives Matter. And I can just say I'm encouraged by that. And again, I just feel the input of all Americans is important for this to be a success. And again, I just look forward to working with you and everyone on this body.
Thank you.
I appreciate that your comments very much. And I agree there's been a groundswell and a great shift. I just hope we can continue to perpetuate the energy where it matters, where it will make a significant difference. One area, for instance, just in the history of Cleveland as I have known it, I was a part of the Greater Cleveland Roundtable, which was the late 80s and the early 90s. It was a gathering of people in business and industry and social concerns to deal with racial issues. It was significant and important. It is now called the Greater Cleveland Partnership. And many of the people, many of the agencies that were a part of the roundtable were cut out. And it's become more of an economic thing with a restrictive perspective. And I'm not putting anything down. I'm just saying, I hope we continue to keep this momentum going in areas where it matters in our county.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any additional questions, comments, or concerns from my colleagues or the committee? There being none, we're going to move on to our next candidate. Thank you, Reverend Walker, for your willingness to continue to serve in this capacity. It is much appreciated. Janice Contreras, I hope I said that right. If you are here, please state your name, the organization you represent, and how you learned about the position.
Morning, buenos dias. I'm Janice Contreras. I'm the Executive Director of the Northeast Ohio Hispanic Center for Economic Development. And I was invited to participate through County Executive Budish.
Okay, and so given this organization, what unique skill, perspective, or expertise do you bring that you will help, that you think will effectively address the crisis of racism?
So our organization exists to address issues of racial equity, specifically when it comes to small business development and economic equity, to ensure that entrepreneurs have a place to go and are able to navigate complex systems like access to capital, as well as just, commercial real estate, just from anything that they have. We have the great fortune of being a small business development center within a neighborhood with a cultural focus. And so that definitely gives us a perspective very much on the ground on what are some of those needs and barriers for folks that are really trying to create, an economic engine for their families, whether it be through a micro business or a longstanding business that's currently trying to survive. So now more than ever, right, our work has been enhanced, and the urgency of the work and the mission of what we do here, and just want to add value to the conversation and the work that this committee will be doing.
Thank you very much. And based on the legislations, what would your top 2 priorities be?
Yeah, so one, obviously I already talked a little bit about it, and it's, economic equity, what that looks like internally for the county, as well as, what that looks like for the county as a whole. For us, we're in a very diverse space, so the conversation is not always black and white. So inclusivity in all of those areas to really be reflective of our county and our region. So that's really important, as well as, what some of the folks have already shared around procurement, diversity and inclusion, what happens, with a lot of the funds that are allocated and the method, right? The policy or the system, whether it's how bids are being packaged, or what are things that have historically excluded folks out, specifically in construction and in other areas that the county has great influence on. Policy is kind of, this is all very multifaceted, but it really kind of starts and ends with policy. And very much to what my colleagues have said, we need to kind of question that. And we're in a day and time that we must, right? Not anymore on like, do we, but we really must question what are those systems and processes that have historically excluded people out, and how can we do better? Because there's also a great opportunity within that.
Excellent. And how much time do you anticipate you'll need to commit to this work?
Sure. I'm very selective. I don't sit on a lot of boards. I don't have a long list on my resume, because I know that I need to be really selfish about the things that I care about and want to contribute wholly. And so when asked to participate, one, it was a great honor. Two, to see so many of my colleagues listed as well, and folks that have been doing this work for decades and decades, was also reassuring. And so therefore I am all in and committed to doing what we need to do. I acknowledge that this is hard work, that this is not, many times not popular, or not anything that is glamorous in a sense, but it's important, and therefore I will make the time necessary to serve.
Thank you very much. I'll open it up to my colleagues if you have any additional questions, comments, or concerns.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilman Jones.
Again, I'd just like to thank Ms. Contreras again for being a part of this process. Again, I look forward to working with you as well as all the others on this body. Again, I think it's a worthy goal, the economic equity and procurement. In this area, we say Black and brown people. All right, there's a tremendous overlap between our concerns, respective concerns, but there are differences. And there are challenges for the Hispanic community. It might be slightly different from the African American community. And I just encourage to have your voice, I know you do, to share, to educate, that we listen. When we were in our racial disparity study plannings 4 years ago, we wanted to, a little more than 4 years ago, probably five plus years ago, we wanted to make an effort to capture the inequity of not just African American, but the Hispanic community as well. So you'll find the racial disparity work one you might enjoy just digging into and seeing the outcomes that were provided, and again where that inequity was found, and again sharing so that we all know. I can always say I'm an expert in my own pain, but I'm not an expert in someone else's. So this is an area where we can listen and also make sure that we're addressing the mosaic of concerns across this county.
Absolutely, thank you. Councilman Jones, we've sat on the same table many times around these issues and specifically related to the disparity study, and have participated in that, as well as worked closely with you around the county's community benefits agreement. So definitely ensuring that we do have the diversity in those conversations, again, that it's not just a black and white conversation. Definitely, I am very glad, or how do I say it? I'm very relieved to see that there's others in this committee, or at least in the nominating board that the county executive put together. Typically you have one maybe, and it's a check the box. And so this feels very intentional to me from county council and administration, that it's not just about checking the box, it's about having a real voice, and definitely a conversation that I had with the county executive when accepting to take this charge.
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. I'm happy to hear that. If there are no additional questions, comments, or concerns from my colleagues, we will move on to our next candidate, Habiba Rashid Grimes. If you will please state your name, your organization, how you found out about the position.
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Habiba Rashid Grimes. I'm the CEO of Positive Education Program. We're a child-serving nonprofit, largely serving young people here in Cuyahoga County. We provide special education and mental health services. And I became aware of this opportunity through Chief Economic Growth and Opportunity Officer, Matt Carroll.
Excellent. And if you could share with us some of the unique skills, perspective, or expertise that you bring that will help us effectively address racism as a public health crisis. You muted. Okay, you're back.
I muted myself. Thank you. I'm happy to share in this regard. I've spent my entire career serving young people with severe and significant learning, mental health, and developmental issues. And in the course of my career, I've been bearing witness to significant levels of suffering, though disparate levels of suffering. And so as I look at the generational impact of trauma in the lives of the children that we serve, we see that children of color, Black children especially, experience this significant transgenerational trauma that affects every domain of their life, their education, their housing stability, the economic health of their family's sense of hope and optimism. And so that bearing witness invites me to really think intentionally about how we call out racism, how we call out anti-Blackness in our work, so that we are really honoring the trauma that our families and children have experienced. I have deep training in trauma-informed care. However, those frameworks have been largely silent on the impact of racism and systemic oppression and systemic racism. And so I am inviting the opportunity to think about the psychological and sociological impact of racism in the lives of people served through the lens of trauma-informed care and practice. And I'm interested in speaking a little bit to lived experience. My own family and myself are lifelong Cuyahoga County residents, and I am raising my children here in Cuyahoga County. And sadly, as I look to the people closest to me who I love deeply, They continue to be deeply, deeply impacted in harmful ways by the legacy of racism and the conditions that racism has created in our community, in our country. So there's a sense of urgency for me to step into this space and also be courageous in calling out and naming the issues, not people, but the issues that are impacting those I love and those I serve.
Excellent. So I would imagine your top two priorities, one being education, and PEP. Your PEP is the affectionately known acronym for the
Yes.
organization that you represent. So would you name your other priority?
You know, the issue, I have to say that there is multi-systemic impacts here. And so healthcare, education, and criminal justice as it relates to youth and how the criminal justice system impacts youth are all very important to me. I'm eager to dig into those issues and the data around those issues. But I think we also have to think of these challenges that racism creates and the harms as multi-systemic. They touch children in this intersectional way and layer on top of families multiple burdens that create cycles of poverty, cycles of suffering, and cycles of harm and hopelessness.
Okay, thank you very much. And I know I can only imagine the demands that your schedule have as it relates to working with the children in the school. Can you share with us the time you anticipate committing as it relates to the work on this committee?
I am grateful to say that in sharing this opportunity with my team, there is a great deal of willingness to share in leadership at PEP, which is a value that I hold more generally, in that the individuals who I work with, it is my goal that I share leadership, that we work together to activate all of our different skill sets and knowledge so that PEP is well cared for as we do our work, and also so that I can engage externally in this critical work. There is really no more important work that I might think of doing right now in terms of committee work and advisory work. And so I am eager to plug in to the depths that, to the greatest extent possible, because all of that is in service to other efforts that I'm involved in the education and mental health space.
Excellent. It looks like my colleague, Councilman Miller, has a question, so I'll go to him.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. Not a question, just want to say welcome to the committee and congratulations on your appointment. And I just want to put it out there that my wife Carol works for the Positive Education Program that you direct. So I don't think that relationship requires recusal on my part, but I did think that it should be publicly disclosed. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Councilman Miller. Councilman Jones, do you have any additional questions, comments, or concerns?
You read my mind. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And Ms. Grimes, again, thank you for your willingness to serve in this capacity. As I listened to you and you talked about education and again, that's the social trauma that our children, and social and emotional challenges that our children face and the trauma. I'm a funeral director by profession, and the trauma in the families over the loss of life. I've seen the individuals who victims of gun violence who have lost their life, and how as I get personal information on each person, a common thread was they just didn't finish high school. It was just an anecdotal assessment, but just a common thread. I see it in recent days, and I know I'll see it in the coming days, and when I meet with another family. One of our efforts has been to provide outcomes at the county, and we have a Closing the Achievement Gap initiative that I think you should look into as well. In terms of education, we've put a 9th grader in high schools around this county, and this mentor put a mentor in the schools. And 9th grade through 12th grade, we focused on just mentoring them, exposing them through college tours, through some level of tutoring, but but again, just building a relationship with these children, support role, not them in their needs of just helping the children to succeed. And we focus on outcomes. That is increasing attendance and the graduation of our children, reducing the suspensions and dropouts, because ninth grade is that year that our children start to drop out of school. So by addressing these things, we've impacted their health, we've impacted their life, we through exposure and building relationships and just loving on these children, we've helped develop leaders out of children who were at risk. So in this area, it's about outcomes. And in fact, in all the areas, we do want outcomes. We don't want just busy work and keeping track of numbers. It's certainly a part of it, a critical part, but the end result is, are we having the outcomes that we desire in the lives of the children and adults and everyone across Cuyahoga County? So again, I just encourage you again to look at some of the things that are already happening and how we build on them. When it comes to outcomes, the administration, they execute, they get the job done. From the council perspective, we legislate, we provide resources, the money. When talking about outcomes, those are the things to consider. What can both branches do to provide the outcomes that we want in the lives of our children? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Jones. If there are no additional questions, comments, or concerns, Ms. Grimes, we do thank you so very much for your willingness to serve in this capacity. Our next candidate up is Dr. Heidi Gullit. Dr. Gullit, if you are on the call, please state your name, your organization, and how you learned about the position.
Hi, my name is Heidi Gullit, and I am the medical director for the Cuyahoga County Board of Health, and I also serve as faculty at Case, Western Reserve University School of Medicine, and as a physician at Neighborhood Family Practice, which is one of our community health centers. And I heard about this position from County Executive Budish, and I'm very grateful and honored to be considered.
Your medical doctor, I guess that is evident, the unique skills and perspective that you bring to this legislation. So I'll just jump to your priorities. Having an opportunity to review it, what would be your top two priorities?
Yeah, thank you so much. So actually my first priority would be to look at the cross-sector policies that exist within county government to systematically review where those policies perpetuate bias and structural violence. I think, as my colleagues who've spoken before have discussed, this is very complex. This is a complex system, and any one of these pieces could be the first thing we tackle. But looking at that has been great concern to me. The second is really about economic equity. You might have thought I would choose health, and that of course is near and dear to my heart. But I really believe, and I see every day in my clinical practice and in my public health practice, the downstream effects of trauma and structural violence and systemic issues of inequity that are avoidable and unjust and really preventable. And so my heart is in working in those upstream issues that then allow for everyone to have the opportunity for health. And so that's why I chose economic equity, and understanding economic opportunity as a critically important part of opportunity for everyone in our community to be healthy.
Excellent, thank you very much. And then the level of time you anticipated you would need to commit when you were offered this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a really important question, and there is no more important or more urgent personal or professional issue for me to personally, I think, focus on than this. My employers hold up this issue around addressing structural racism and equity, achieving equity in our community as critically important for our organization. So I believe I have the support of the people who employ me, but personally, this also is of incredible significance. And I feel like as a white person in this, I've got to devote whatever time it takes to make sure that this is addressed across the community and that issues of privilege are addressed head on. And even though they're uncomfortable and difficult and political, that's no excuse for us not to address them in really meaningful ways. So I will devote whatever time it takes to get the work that we need to done.
Thank you, Dr. Gullit. I will open it up to my colleagues for any additional questions or comments. All right, there being none. Thank you, Dr.
I'm
Gullit.
sorry, Madam Chair, that's that darn mute button again.
Go ahead.
I have a question as well.
It's followed by Miller.
Oh, I'll let Councilman go. I'll yield to my colleague.
Councilman Miller.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. And my question to Dr. Gullit is how directly are you involved in the work that the Board of Health is doing to fight COVID-19? And what perspectives do you think you can bring into this committee regarding the racial disparities regarding COVID-19?
It's a great question. So I began serving in the incident command role in March and have remained intimately involved throughout our entire response, from on the ground case calling, cluster investigation, contact tracing, to more systemic issues around how our response looks, to driving our community and sort of designing our community testing strategy that's grounded in equity. So I've been involved in every piece of our COVID-19 response and feel including analysis of data. And so I feel very strongly that we cannot address COVID-19 in our community unless we call out the link to structural racism and the link to understanding why there are inequities in outcomes with regard to this pandemic and this novel virus. So it's really, really important, but that's why a few weeks ago in our press briefing, I felt the need to discuss very, very clearly why structural racism has to be the first piece of conversation before we can even talk about what COVID-19 looks like. People want to jump to just the virus and its impact, but if you don't understand the context, you can't understand why there are differences in outcomes and why those are unjust and preventable. The other thing I want to say is that for since 2014, I think I've been working with my colleague Greg Brown and co-chairing the Health Improvement Partnership Cuyahoga, and have been intimately involved in our work and our shared priority around eliminating structural racism. And so we've been working really hard to understand the system and where the levers are for movement on this issue. And it's something I hold very dear. But one of my gravest concerns has been that the important declarations that are happening locally and around the nation, eliminating structural racism and identifying structural racism as a public health crisis, would be where it ends, and it can't be. It absolutely can't be. It's an important declaration, but we've got to back it up with action, and we've got to back it up with resources and very thoughtful ways to address the system issues that are here. So for me, it's all linked.
So, Madam Chair, Dr. Gullit, thank you for that answer, and it's clear that you bring a very broad perspective about COVID-19 that I think is going to be extremely valuable for this committee, because it's a very important part of the context that we're currently working under. So thank you very much for your willingness to serve.
Councilman Jones.
Okay. Again, thank you, Dr. Gullit, for being a part of this process and your willingness to serve. And your comments, I just have to say, they touched me. They did. And the reason being your comments about operating downstream, but the desire to deal with the structural issues and concerns that are upstream. I've lived that through my council committee work. When I first came into office, I wanted to be in Health and Human Services to deal with issues there, but I chaired OPD, Procurement and Diversity Committee, the Public Works Committee. I chaired Public Works first because I saw that's where the contracts were, the opportunity to have a job, and so that with a job you could deal with your own health issues if you had a paycheck. So I started in procurement, but over time I moved through other committees. I became the chair of Health and Human Services, in a sense moving downstream, wanting to help those right in that moment, and being dealing with the impact that racism could have on an individual. So your passion is needed, and that point of view needs to really be heard by everyone. That there are downstream concerns that we need to be compassionate about and be with individuals in their time of need. But someone does need to go upstream. They need to tread up that hill and put their finger in the dam that would really deal with everything, that the bucket loads of issues that are flooding the community downstream. But it's no light, it's not light work, it's heavy lifting to get up that hill and one day get our finger in that dam of issues, whether it's, well, we know what those issues are, but it's important work. And I just commend you for your passion, for your perspective. And I just say to you that I share it. And again, thank you, Dr. Gullit.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman Jones. If there are no additional questions, comments, or concerns, thank you, Dr. Gullit, for your willingness to serve in this capacity. I'm going to move on to our next candidate, Ms. Phyllis Seven Harris. I see. Ms. Harris, if you will state your name, your organization for the record, and how you found out about the position.
Hi, Phyllis Seven Harris. I'm the Executive Director of the LGBT Community Center of Greater Cleveland, and I learned of the position via phone call with Executive Armin Budish.
All right, thank you very much. And then what unique skills, experience, or expertise do you bring that you think will be beneficial to addressing the racism as a public health crisis?
That it's possible to do this based on my lived experience, being a nonprofit practitioner here in Cleveland and working for organizations that really had, different missions, but all around social change and, all socially charged missions where we had to look at our work through the lens of all of the isms, including racism, and how it impacted the work that we did on a daily basis. And so this is this has been a journey of, understanding that it is systemic and possible to not only address, but create policy, legislation, and opportunity through advocacy, through activism, through listening to people and believing them, and to, taking the data that we already have and doing something with it.
Thank you very much. And based on the legislation, what would be your top 2 priorities?
Well, I'm interested in a lot, certainly in what happens in our community in terms of the disparities that we see within the LGBTQ community around racism, around and how the impact of that. So if we look at the challenges around violence against women, and then you look at Black trans women and the challenges that they face and violence and the disparity around that. And so I think, some of the priorities around how racism and specifically anti-Black racism impacts, what happens around violence against women and who gets listened to and who doesn't. In that while we're doing this work, that we are truly seeking equity in terms of changing systems toward equity, and we're truly seeking inclusivity, and that means everyone.
Excellent. And when you were invited to participate on this body, how much time do you anticipate you would have to give?
Well, it's always a leap of faith to jump into something and you're not given the framework for how much time it's really going to take. And we all know that doing anti-racism work is not, is absolutely a journey and takes time and commitment and intentionality. And one of the first things that I did was I checked in with my board chair here, who we are both Black folks, Black leaders who are for the first time for our organization in a leadership role to during this time. And we're excited about the work that's ahead for us. And I got his, Justin Gould is his name, and I got his commitment to bring the strength of our organization, the strength of our leadership, and the strength of our community to this process to represent, for us and the broader, LGBTQ community in Cuyahoga County. So as my job is shifting and I'm learning more about civic engagement in Cuyahoga,
that they are actually online. You have seen them in conversations.
Mr. Gallagher, you've unmuted yourself.
I will be bringing, I will have support from leadership here to be able to make the adjustments that I think that are necessary. We are prioritizing racial justice and anti-Black racism work.
Excellent. Okay, and I'll open it up to my colleagues for any additional questions, comments, or concerns.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilman Miller.
To Ms. Harris, thanks very much for serving. And I would just like if you could give a little of your observations on how prejudice against the LGBT community and anti-Black racism intersect.
Well, absolutely. If you look at certainly all of the isms are interconnected. You know, I learned this years ago before we caught on to Kimberly Crenshaw's intersectionality. And so if you're talking about marginalized identities and we talk about Black people and we talk about LGBTQ people, queer people, we are living very intersectional lives. We include other marginalized identities or in that. And so there is no, you know, it's really about, for me, social justice and understanding the interconnectedness of all of these isms. And if we can get, and we can, and if we can address and really confront and correct racism, we're all going to fare better, no matter what other identities that we also bring. I think they work. It works hand in hand. Thanks. However, I love that we're prioritizing looking at racism as a public health issue and a crisis. I think, again, there's nowhere to go but up from there.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much, Ms. Harris, for your willingness to serve in this capacity. If there are no additional questions, comments, or concerns from my colleagues, I will move on to our next candidate, Mr. Randall Mcshepherd. Mr. Randall Mcshepherd, if you are here, if you'll please state your name, your organization, and how you learned about the position.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Randall Mcshepherd. I wear a few hats. I'm a corporate executive with RPM International Incorporated, a worldwide chemical coatings company headquartered in Medina, Ohio. I'm also the chairman and co-founder of Policy Bridge, which is an African-American think tank that's been in existence for 16 years. We ironically have written about, spoken publicly about, and organized forums around the very issues to a great extent that are outlined in the racism as a public health crisis document. We have 5 central areas that we focused on, including education, workforce development, economic development, neighborhoods, and health disparities. You heard Dr. Gullit talk about Greg Brown. He's our executive director. And obviously, these issues are near and dear to my heart, having studied them so intently and lived the experience of being an African-American male and been in Cleveland my entire life. This is what I do for anyone that knows me. And I think it's a critical juncture for our county and our city. And this was brought to my attention by County Executive Armin Budish.
Okay, excellent. And you touched on some of the unique skills and expertise that you bring. So given that, what would your top 2 priorities be based on the legislation that you've read?
I would join a few of the callers or members in sharing my concern around economic opportunity. I think that if we can provide that, it can solve many of the other ills affecting our communities. Secondly, I would come to this with a real keen interest and focus on systems, practices, and accountability at the county level. I bring a unique experience in that I have served on city, county, and state boards and commissions. And one of the things I used to say in those experiences is that I learned as a business guy that there's a speed of business that is quite different than the speed of government. And I think that we have to be efficient. And just as you all, Madam Chair, you rightfully challenged us to commit to the time that it really will require to do this work, I would push back to the county and say that it will be very much your responsibility to make the most of the volunteers' time and to make sure that meetings are run efficiently, that information is gathered as needed to be effective, to help us to be more effective in our work. And I, as you might know, served as one of the 8 executive committees for Cuyahoga County government reform. So I'm very familiar with a lot of the discussions around county government, what the general public hoped for when the government was, this new model was put in place. And I'm just excited about, getting in, rolling up my sleeves and understanding what we can do as a committee to really further enhance and improve those systems and the way that we do business and the way that we address the many challenges that we'll certainly uncover in a way that leads to change and progress.
As you mentioned challenges, and you've been doing this work for quite some time, can you share with us some of the challenges that have prevented some of the progress that we hope to achieve by doing this work now?
Well, I think I always like to say when people ask what's the biggest challenge facing Northeast Ohio, I say it's it boils down to lack of a sense of urgency and too much comfort with the status quo. The only way that this project is going to matter is if we realize that things have to change. It's not going to be comfortable. Practices that we're all used to have to change because obviously they haven't worked, or we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation. So when you start to talk about changing, dismantling a department, changing the way people reporting structures, changing procurement policies and practices, you start to rub and make people very uncomfortable that have lived their lives and have built careers doing that very work. So if we're serious about this, we have to know that at the other side, or on the other side, some things are going to look and feel differently. And we should all, take comfort in the fact that regardless of how uncomfortable it may get, that if the system of county government is better, we would have all served our time in the right way and for the right reason. So that's where I've seen those hiccups. Just people they're excited about having the conversation, but if it starts to affect the way their department or their position or their views of how government works, if that starts to get rubbed too much, I've seen people sort of push back and suggest that maybe this wasn't such a good idea. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, it does. And I appreciate as you touch on pushback, even the challenge or the suggestion that the county put forth the necessary tools for you to be able to succeed. And I do want to express that is duly noted. And I echo your sentiments. And before this meeting is over, we will touch on that as well. So I'll open it up to my colleagues if you have any additional questions, comments, or concerns for Mr. Randall Mcshepherd. If there are none, thank you, Mr. Mcshepherd.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Hey, Councilman Jones.
One, I just want to thank you, Mr. Mcshepherd. I've had opportunity to work with you over the years. I know your good work at Policy Bridge. And I just want to say one that I hear and receive this point that you have made. This is a long game. It is a marathon. And it's one thing to set the commission up, but it's another thing to actually go the distance. Again, it's a marathon, to have the stamina to let this follow through and let it provide the outcomes that I think we all ultimately want. But it is heavy lifting, and it's going to require months and years of work and being receptive to what this body is presenting to us. So one, I hear you, and I look forward to, again, working with you.
Thank you,
Likewise. Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you, Councilman Jones. And thank you again, Mr. Mcshepherd, for your willingness to serve in this capacity. If there are no additional questions, comments, or concerns, I'm going to move to our next candidate, Ms. Marsha Maccabee. Ms. Marsha Maccabee, if you will follow the same protocol, please state your name, the organization you represent, and how you learned about the position.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I am Marsha Maccabee, President and CEO of the Urban League of Greater Cleveland. And I was invited by our county executive, Budish.
And I know from personal experience, having seen you in several circles, that you have quite a bit of demand on your schedule. So Upon receiving the invitation, how much time did you anticipate committing to this committee?
So, Madam Chair, let me answer your question in this way. I look at time as a pie that's divided up into many different priorities that shift around from time to time based on a number of factors. Having completed 2 degrees online, working full-time, and going to school full-time gave me quite a bit of insight on how to do that over a 5-year period. The thing that we know is that busy people get things done. And what I've learned over particularly the 11 years of serving as the president and CEO of the Urban League of Greater Cleveland is that the best way to serve in the community is to look at 2 things when you say yes. One is there mission alignment to your organization with the work that you're being asked to do? Because that really makes sense economically for your business that you run every day, as well as it makes it easy to get along with your board because the work is the same. Second, it has to align to your passion because you're surely going to give your personal time outside of your 9 to 5 or 9 to 7, or now that we're all in this teleworking mode, you know, there are no boundaries. You don't mind giving the extra time because it's something that meets your passion. So to me, what's important is that there's alignment with the mission. I'm personally engaged with this work. It's important to me. I'm willing to go beyond and above. And I think what else is important is whenever I hit a bump that says I'm not able to do what's being asked, I'm going to have the integrity to say so. So
excellent. I'm happy to hear that. So I know, as you have indicated, you have a number of skills and expertise. Which of them do you believe will be most beneficial to the mission of addressing racism as a public health crisis?
Thank you for that question. I believe that the ability to convene and facilitate and to motivate others and encourage others to join a vision are things that I can bring to the table that will be helpful. I've done that with my other 6 colleagues across the state who run urban leagues. I actually facilitate the Ohio Council of Urban Leagues. And so, you know, when you're working with and facilitating peer level individuals, you know, that's an honor, number one, that they, you know, will accept your leadership and allow you to provide that. So I think that's something that I bring. And I believe in pushing hard in anything that I'm in to make sure that the vision is clear. I walk by the fact that without a vision, the people perish. And if the vision is not clear, everything that falls from the vision can get muddy. And so I think it's going to be important for us to be clear and compelling about the vision and to make our vision unique, because there's lots of other folks who are committing to this work. And we want to make sure that the work of the county is clear, compelling, and unique in its focus.
And what would be your top 2 priorities from the legislation that we've presented?
So I came into this with one thought, but as I've listened to some of my colleagues speak already, I think the whole economic equity piece would be my top priority because it cuts across the 3 areas that are important to the work I do daily, which is entrepreneurship, education, and workforce. But also so the second thing is we're girded by social justice work. And so really looking at from the social justice perspective is really important, and really just being that equity champion that we're actually working in across many industries that we're working in and across many pillars that we're working in.
Excellent. And then one last question for me, and then I'll open it up to my colleagues, is that given your experience and having done this work for, I think you said 16 years at least in this circle.
11 as a CEO, but yeah.
The CEO, yes. What have been the challenges that have prevented you from or prevented this work that we're doing now from being fulfilled?
So absolutely structural racism in systems. You know, as I often say, the civil rights movement was a movement that was able to legislate civil rights, but legislating does not change the hearts and minds of people. It does not change the culture of organizations. And so the work that we are embarking on now is about that. And it's going to take time. We're going to have to be patient. We're going to have to stay the distance. We're going to have to be like iron sharpening iron against each other. And you know, when iron sharpens iron, sometimes sparks fly. But it's going to be important to keep pushing against that and to really be thoughtful about what are the indicators that we're moving the needle, because that'll keep us encouraged, I think, to keep going and keep moving forward.
Thank you so much. I'm very encouraged by all of your responses and your participation in this committee. So I will open it up to my colleagues. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns from my colleagues as it pertains to Marsha Maccabee? If there are none, we're going to move on to our next candidate, India Pierce-Lee. Thank you, Ms. Maccabee, for your willingness to serve in this capacity. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
And Ms. India Pierce-Lee, if you will follow the same protocol, if you will share with us your name, the organization you represent, and how you learned about the position.
Hi, thank you. India Pierce-Lee, Senior Vice President of Program at the Cleveland Foundation. And I was invited by County Executive Armin Budish for this opportunity.
Excellent. And can you share with us the unique skills, perspective, or expertise that you bring that will help fulfill the mission of effectively addressing racism as a public health crisis?
Yes, given my background for over more than 30 years working in community and economic development, and specifically in neighborhoods of Cuyahoga County and Cleveland, all the issues that we are talking about today, I've been working on. And having at the foundation now, working with a lot of the organizations that are at the table, the county, the city, and others on these systemic issues that we have continued to face. We've done a lot to have programs and initiatives that change the lives of people, but we have done nothing to change the systemic and institutional racism that exists that will really make the impact that we have. Not only, and people know me, I'm not a shrinking violet. I've been around these tables for a long time, working on the very things and calling this out when necessary. I even went, like Marsha and some others, went back to school in 2015 and did the diversity management program full-time at Cleveland State to try and actually find ways to be more articulate about why these issues matter. And I think that the skills that I bring is that I work with a lot of people that are passionate about this. Will I give it the time? Absolutely. This is what I do day to day. And I think that it's really important that not only we take this seriously, that as we look at these systems, that we're willing to make the hard changes that come with it. And I think my colleague, Randall Mcshepherd, said it best. There's going to be a lot of challenges and people resisting the change, but it's also going to require training as well as awareness to get people to change their mindsets about why this is important.
Thank you very much. And with that said, the top 2 priorities based on the legislation that you have read that we presented?
Like many others, economic opportunity for me is a high priority, as well as looking at how all these systems are integrated among all the areas to make those changes, and criminal justice reform. I think those are really critical issues at this time. It's unfortunate how we got here, but I'm grateful and hopeful that people are committed to this work for the long term, that we will make the changes that we need.
Thank you very much. I'll open it up to my colleagues if you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns regarding Ms. India, Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, again, India, thank you for your willingness to serve. I greatly appreciate it. And I just have to thank you on a personal level for all you've done. I know your good work, and you have provided economic opportunity to our family. If we go back and look at the empowerment zone work when you were director in the city of Cleveland, I know the struggles that my father had to grow our business, the inability to simply get a loan, to not knowing when you apply for loans and if you're truly qualified or not, because everyone tells you no. Okay, so you just keep saving and saving as if that's going to get you where you want to be. But it wasn't until Mayor Michael White and yourself came along and you leveraged the banks. You let them know if you don't provide loans to the businesses in our community, then we're not going to deposit our tax dollars with you. And with that statement, you brought a bank to the table that gave us a loan, and we repaid that loan. We made sure we paid them that it was a good loan for everyone. And as a result, our business has grown, as it expanded. We have a beautiful building with pretty green grass out front. And I would have loved, and I do still desire, for every business around me and every vacant lot around me to have that individual have an opportunity just as you provided for our business. So your work is the outcome, is what we want to see. The things that you have spent your time working on, those are the things that are needed in our community. To have a job, to have a quality education, to have a police system that serves and protects all you work so hard to achieve. That's what the community wants, if I could be so bold as to speak for an entire community. But those are the things that we want. Those are the upstream things that'll give us the capacity to just to take care of ourselves and be a viable and contributing member of society. So again, thank you for again being a part of this process.
Thank you, Councilman Jones, and thank you, Ms. Lee. I would echo those sentiments that the bold and out-of-the-box thinking ideas is what we are looking for from this body, and the bravery and courage to push those agendas aggressively and assertively as possible. So if there are no additional questions, comments, or concerns, our next candidate up is going to be Mr. Cordell Stokes. Mr. Stokes, you have the floor. If you will please state your name, the organization you represent, and how you learned about the position.
Sure, Madam Chair, members of the County Council, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Cordell Stokes, Chairman and CEO for CLC Stokes Consulting Group, a national business development and governmental relations firm. And as many others, received the invitation through County Executive Armin Budish.
Excellent. And you, would you share with us some of the unique skills, perspective, or expertise you bring that will help fulfill the mission to address racism as a public health crisis?
Sure, Madam Chair. I've had the fortunate opportunity to work in multiple states, very large cities, very complex crises and situations to be dealt with, and working within the infrastructure of both Hispanic, Black, and Asian communities, including here in Cleveland, Ohio. And then, of course, with my former leader and great friend, Marsha Maccabee, working in an infrastructure that deals with nothing but platform issues needing equitability.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure you've had a chance to review our legislation. So what would be your top 2 priorities based on what you've read?
Number 1 would be to, first of all, work within the guidelines of the past legislation that established this body. Then number 2, to identify the disparate gaps within the county infrastructure and work to develop a policy infrastructure that would allow for equitable career ladders and procurement.
Thank you very much. And when you were invited to be a part of this committee, how much time did you anticipate what might be needed to serve?
Well, I took it to heart when you made that comment on the front end of your introduction. All of us here have very busy schedules. And then when the county executive inquired of my desire to participate, the 2 things he stated was, number 1, are you going to be here local enough in order to work within this infrastructure? And number 2, this is a very demanding situation that we need your committed time. I agreed with both. And also, one of the things I want to make sure you understand is working within multiple states, dealing with multiple clients on multiple fronts. One of the things I made sure not to do is to bog myself down with too many committees around the country and focus in on the work, so that when an opportunity like this arises in such a critical time, I could dedicate myself to this.
Excellent. I'm pleased to hear that. So I'll open it up to my council colleagues in the committee if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. All right, if there
Madam
are.
Chair,
Okay,
and
go
give me,
ahead.
I had static in my phone, so I did not hear
Oh,
Cordell's points of, your common question of what are your priorities. If you could just briefly say again what his priorities were.
Sure, Councilman, they very much align with what you have been saying all day. Many of it is around procurement, but also the employment aspect. Because as you stated earlier, if someone has access either on the business side to be able to get the type of business that can actually generate wealth from the minority standpoint, and or be able to access career ladder opportunities, just not low-level entry opportunities within the county, but be able to get into positions of sustainability, then we help to be able to address many of the inequitable situations out here from an employment, housing, food, and other issues pertinent to a person's and family's ability to survive.
Okay. Well, thank you. I don't have a specific question, Cordell. I've worked with you over the years, and I can barely keep up with you. So I look forward to working with you.
It's my pleasure to all of you.
excellent. Thank you, Mr. Stokes, for your willingness to serve on this body. It is greatly appreciated, and I trust you will bring a wealth of experience and knowledge to this.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're very welcome. If there are no further questions, comments, or concerns regarding his candidacy, we're going to move on to our next candidate, Ms. Danielle Sydney. Ms. Danielle Sydney, if you will follow the same protocol, state your name, the organization, and how you learned about this opportunity.
Good morning. My name is Danielle Sydney. I am the founder and CEO of We Win Strategies Group, a consulting practice that's designed to help organizations and communities create win-win strategies around inclusive relief efforts for COVID-19 and broader situations. Additionally, I'm the president for the Cleveland branch of the NAACP, and I heard about the opportunity from County Executive Budish.
Excellent. And keeping with the same protocol, can you share with us the amount of time that you anticipated you would need to commit to this organization when you received the invitation?
Sure. Similar to what many of my colleagues stated, I think that it's hard to quantify and put a specific number of hours on an initiative like this. I really do believe that many of the things that I do will intertwine and weave into this work. And that's one of the reasons that I said yes. I try and say no to things that are opposite of things that I'm already involved in. So I find ways to make sure that I'm bringing these types of efforts and initiatives into all the spaces that I go in. And so with this work, I would be prepared to provide as much time as necessary, and then also make sure that I'm a champion of the work in the community as well.
Excellent. And then can you share with us some of the unique skills, perspective, or expertise you bring that would effectively address the mission?
So one of the things that I think is unique that I bring to the table, along with you and a couple others in this group, is to bring a perspective of those of us who are under the age of 50. And I think that's important in this work, because we have to think about building for the next generation of individuals who are coming behind us and inheriting this work of social justice and this work of breaking down systemic racism. While I believe there are many in our community and many on this call who have been fighting and will continue to fight so long as they are here, we also have to take responsibility as a generation that's coming behind to ensure that we're doing our part to provide adequate contributions. And so I believe my access to technology, my understanding of the civil rights landscape, being the president, and also being able to navigate in a virtual world is some skills that I bring to the table currently.
Excellent. And I should note that Danielle is a advocate and one that I consider a friend. So based on what you just said, what would your top two priorities be based on the legislation?
Economic equality is something that I've talked about for a long time, is something that I believe is foundational for many of the other things that we're trying to accomplish. And then I would also add in there, the health disparities. I think the two are very intertwined. If people are unhealthy, it's hard to go to work and all the other things. So we have to address the economic issues and then, the health issues that also we find ourselves in as a result of economic conditions.
Okay, thank you very much. So I will open it up to my colleagues. If you have any additional questions, comments, or concerns, I'm just going to go right to you, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Ms. Sidnor, I'd just like to, again, thank you for being part of this process. I had an opportunity to I think we met for the first time. We've probably been in each other's presence in other moments, but a chance to sit with you at Randall Mcshepherd's event a few months ago before all this COVID hit. So it was a pleasure to meet you, to hear your passion, your concern. And I just looking forward to working with you, Ms. Sidnor, because I know you are a valuable asset to this whole process. So again, just thank you for being a part of it.
Thank you,
All right.
Councilman Miller.
Madam Chair, and to Ms. Sidnor, thank you very much for volunteering for this committee. And my question is if you could talk a little bit more about the consulting organization on COVID-19 that you mentioned and what perspectives you can bring from that to this committee.
Sure. Thank you, Councilman Miller. One of the things actually I was doing prior to launching my consulting firm, I've worked in economic development for a number of years and specifically helped to lead the initiative around the county's Small Business Stabilization Fund loan and grant program. And so in doing that work, Councilman, I identified that there were a number of individuals, even with our best attempts, that were left outside of access to the resources that we were attempting to pull together, which made me identify that we have to do even more than we're doing today to try and create accessible and inclusive opportunities for small businesses. And so just thinking about ways that we can connect folks like you all who have access to some of the most influential people in our community to individuals that are often denied access because of where their business is located, maybe their current sophistication in business, and really trying to be a conduit to connect those two communities together. And so really working on ideas and strategies that will make it easier for us as individuals that have access to business resources in the community to connect with those that are desperately in need of it.
Well, Madam Chair, Ms. Sidnor, thanks very much for that answer. It sounds like you have some very practical, real world experience about how we connect the dots that'll be useful to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sidnor, again, for your willingness to participate in this capacity and to share your skills and experience with us is a tremendous asset. So if there are no additional questions, comments, or concerns, I'm going to move on.
I do have one other question though, Madam Chair.
Mr. Jones.
As the president of the NAACP, I was wondering if you had any thoughts on police reform, criminal justice reform, or in general, or even in specific to what the county might do and might be able to do.
Yes, I was trying to be a rule follower today and only pick two, but criminal justice reform is absolutely something that I really do believe is intertwined largely with economic conditions. If we look at individuals who are able to escape the prison system, not because of innocence or guilt, many times it's identified to the resources that they possess. And so we've talked a lot within the NAACP about bail reform. We've also talked about the conditions within our county jail and within our system statewide. And there are many of us who have been working very closely together around individuals who are currently incarcerated, who are at higher risk of exposure to COVID-19. So, Councilman, that's something that I'm very passionate about, but I think that we have to really do the tough work of trying to address systemic root issues that end up finding themselves in many of the symptoms that ill our communities.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right, excellent. Thank you again, Ms. Sidnor, for your willingness to serve. If there are no additional questions, comments, or concerns for Ms. Sidnor, I am going to move on to Eddie Taylor. And I should also note that I know all of the candidates are very passionate about all of these issues, which is why I intentionally limited them to two. Having 15 candidates before us today, I wanted to try to manage our time as effectively as possible. So with that said, Eddie Taylor, you are up next. If you will please state your name, your organization, and how you learned about the position today.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Eddie Taylor. I'm an entrepreneur. Principally, I run a company called Taylor Oswald, which is an insurance brokerage firm headquartered downtown Cleveland. I'm also chair of the President's Council. The President's Council is an organization of African-American business owners who own this thing together called the President's Council. There are component parts to it, which I'll talk about in just a moment, but I'm in the long line of individuals that heard from the county executive that fateful day. That's how I heard of this.
All right, excellent. So when you touch on your, let's hear about your skills and the unique expertise that you bring to help successfully fulfill this mission today.
I'm not sure how unique the skills are, because everyone on the line has done things which are not only heroic for our community, but made a difference. But more recently, in addition to the President's Council, I was the chairman of the Commission on Economic Inclusion, the division of the Greater Cleveland Partnership, and a number of things we did through that process, including making certain that CBA was signed with the city at that point. And so much of that model was adopted, in my belief, by the county executive. In addition, when the county executive became county executive, one of the early things we did through his request was affect and change the bonding requirements in doing business with the county. And our folks worked on a lot of that, those efforts early on. So what's unique is that I've been at this work for a lot of years, both through the President's Council, Commission on Economic Inclusion, and the various boards and civic organizations where I sit and play a role.
Excellent. And for those who are watching who aren't familiar, CBA is the Community Benefits Agreement. Relative to the legislation that we have presented, what would be your top 2 priorities there?
Well, the first, it's around healthcare. There, all the comments around social determinants of health and the disparities in health really come to light for all of us over the last several months, especially, but these have been present for a while. I am currently the chair of University Hospitals Cleveland Medical Center, and I'll go to the time issue in just a moment. But because of that role, because, and this was a limited duty, I stood up the construction effort for the Rainbow Women's and Children's Center, which then led to bringing quality care to women and children in that corridor of our community. All those things have made a difference in terms of what and everyone calls these social determinants of health. And finally, it's about economic inclusion. The President's Council as an organization has been at this work for 20 plus years. We have a Chamber of Commerce, an African-American Chamber of Commerce in the community, which has over 100 members. We have our PC Scholars, where we take these young kids in high school, CMSD kids who are average in terms of their grades. They all graduate from college. They all matriculate to a 2 or 4 year institution. That work continues. I want to make sure that around the entire expanse of what we do within the council, that we can do more when it comes to economic inclusion. So from the early education to making sure these entrepreneurs who we take through a year-long, we'll call it mini MBA, learn the skills, trades needed to grow their businesses from a strategic standpoint.
Excellent. And you started to touch on the time commitment. I know just crossing paths, I think we were on a call this morning at 8 o'clock.
Yeah. So, the way I do it, everyone's busy, but we prioritize the things that are important to us. Just that simple. And this will become a high priority.
And so, and giving that you've been at this work for quite some time, can you just touch on some of the challenges that have prevented the progress as it relates to the work we're talking about today?
Yeah, there's no shortage of good efforts, good intentions, and desire. It's just and I'm now perhaps undermining my candidacy, but it's the inaction that's taken place over the course of time. Again, good intentions, the follow through to completion has always been lacking. And what I have heard from folks on this call and what the council has charged everyone with, there won't be any inaction, right? That lull that so many of us experience doesn't seem to be present here. So I look forward to seeing this thing through whatever completion looks like, but progress has to be an outcome.
Excellent. Councilman Jones, I'll open it up to you and the remainder of the colleagues.
Thank you. And again, as with everyone, Mr. Taylor, I appreciate your willingness to serve and getting this far in the process. Mr. Taylor, as you were speaking, what came to mind to me was, again, as I mentioned earlier, closing the Achievement Gap initiative, our county initiative to help mentor our 9th through 12th grade children. We literally reorient them from thinking about going out of the door and dropping out to looking forward and seeing a future. And I can see a role where we're exposing our children to the business opportunities, to the jobs, and to the again, all that your President's Council has to offer. Partnerships with those youth, I can see being a critical piece. So as you all assess the county and our shortcomings, some of the things that are going well in the county, I would just recommend you look into those as well and providing those opportunities. And once they graduate high school, once they finish college, just the ability to provide them with the resource of just finding work right here within this community. I think that's a critical piece as well. Sometimes individuals just need help out of college, finding the housing and just plugging into the community with the job opportunities and finding those areas where the county could play a role, I think would be a critical component. So again, I just thank you, Mr. Taylor, for your willingness to serve and willing to just look over all that the county is doing and times not doing.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman Jones. Looks like Councilman Miller, do you have a question, comment, or concern for Mr. Taylor?
Madam Chair, to Mr. Taylor, just would appreciate if you could say a little bit more about the consultant business that you run and what perspectives that brings for you to this process.
Well, it is consultancy, but as much as anything else, Taylor Oswald, and you have one of my board members on the call as well, Mr. Mcshepherd. Taylor Oswald is an insurance agency, risk management agency. So whether it's commercial insurance or healthcare. Now, in times past, I owned a consulting agency that did similar activities, but that was long ago sold.
Okay, thanks very much.
All right, Councilman Miller, if there are no additional questions, comments, or concerns, thank you, Mr. Taylor, for your willingness to continue to serve in this capacity on this body, and good to see you again today. If there are no additional questions, comments, or concerns, we're going to move to our next candidate, next and final candidate, who I will charge with the marathon award for this meeting, Ms. Sheila M. Wright. Ms. Wright, if you will state your name, the organization you represent, and how you want to the position, please. Is Ms. Wright with us?
Madam Chair, she was, oh, here she comes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, you have to unmute, Ms. Wright. We don't hear you. Okay, there you go.
Sorry about that.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I come to this with a few hats as well. I run, as most of you know, a private foundation, and I sit on other committees and boards that have at their core a commitment to work around equity. And that is pretty much what I've dedicated a considerable amount of my professional career to in various positions and efforts. And so I came about this by an invitation from County Executive Armin Budish. And I'm honored to be here before you today.
Thank you very much. So when you received the invitation, how much time did you anticipate you might need to dedicate to this work?
I'm probably about an hour a week.
Okay,
is realistic for me. So I appreciate the question. And I echo the sentiments of our colleague, Randall Mcshepherd, in hoping that whatever time is utilized, that it is time well spent and planned for, and that we are able to accomplish what our overall goals and objectives are of the committee.
Okay. And what skills and expertise, unique skills, do you think that you bring to this body that will be advantageous in effectively addressing the mission of eradicating racism?
I think largely my professional experience, working obviously with the NAACP, working in the capacity that I have with the foundation that I work for now, the Good Community Foundation, and just really a lot of the relationships that translates essentially into social and political capital that I've stacked up over the years, being able to leverage that and the comfort that I have with being able to speak truth to power, I have the privilege and opportunity, as most of the people, actually, I would probably say all of the people who have been asked to be a part of this, to have some hand in either decision-making or influence around the allocation of resources and the execution and drafting of policies. And so that is a skill set and a talent that I would bring to this endeavor.
Thank you. And your top 2 priorities?
Economic development, priority 1, equity around economic development and economic opportunities. And then I would say really around policies as it relates to how resources and decisions are made. And when I say that, I believe strongly in a practice called co-opetition, where we refine and measure to make sure that we are hitting the right targets when it comes to how we deploy resources. And so we're not funding and recreating different efforts, but that we are measuring and exacting things that are actually working.
Given your depth of experience and your participation in many organizations, what has been the biggest challenge that has prevented progress from happening as it relates to this work?
I would say convening the bands of the willing. You know, most of the efforts and accomplishments that I've been able to be a part of or witness over the years has been when there was political will, community will, corporate will. And so I am very clear at this point in my life and career what makes something happen and what makes something become stale and sit on the shelf. And what I'm clear is when there is a will to do it, we can get things done. And so in that sense, you know, I listened to some of the earlier conversations, and I can't remember which, I think it was a council person who spoke about the role of this committee being advisory only, and how decisions are ultimately going to be left to the administration and this body. And while I appreciate that, I don't think any of you have taken your time out of your busy schedules today to sit and convene people to be on this advisory committee for those, for that insight or advice to just simply fall on deaf ears. There is an expectation, I have an expectation, that there is a willingness on the other side of this to truly hear the advice and the discussions from this committee, if we are all fortunate, if I'm fortunate to be a part of it or not. I just think there has to be a willingness. This can't be a check the box in a sense that this part of it is done, but that there is actual movement. And I would hope that we don't have to have any kind of particular legislative teeth behind this in order to make that happen.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your comments as it relates to that. And this is an advisory board, and I think the point that you make is very valid. The introduction of this legislation for me, as I have been so graciously graciously labeled as the leader on this legislation, is that one of the things that I wanted to make sure is that it wasn't just words on paper, and that we are putting teeth to the work that we do. And so it was very important for me that my staff and the council, that we identified very clear marking points relative to the data and statistics that are disproportionately affecting Black people. So I don't want anyone to lose sight that this work is very valuable work. We are looking for you to give us very real recommendations. We are looking for your voice to be strong and powerful as we do this work. So that is why I led with what I led with as far as your ability to commit the time, to reconsider if you don't have the time to commit, because we are long overdue in this work. The other thing that I'd like to add before I bring this meeting to a close. I would like to open it up to my colleagues if you have any specific questions for Ms. Wright regarding her candidacy. If not, I will bring it to my closing remarks. Councilman Jones.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. And I just want to, again, thank you, Ms. Wright, for being a part of this process. And your words don't fall on deaf ears. I echo them. All of our time is precious. And those that desire to take this work seriously, and I believe we all do, we need to know that what you produce, we want to be able to act on to the best of our ability. As I listen to everyone, the thoughts that have come to my mind is what we need is people just want some very simple things. They want a quality education that allows them to get a good job, career, or business, you know, to buy that American dream, which is that house with the white picket fence. And as I said earlier, to have a police force that'll serve and protect all that you work so hard to acquire. And we're here to fight the racism, the naked power that prevents us from achieving these things. Okay? So the work that you all do are going to help move this needle. And no one's time is to be wasted. I've been on many committees that when things are not going the way they should, then people start to drop off. They start to recuse themselves or just simply not participate. And it's almost a sign of people walking with their feet that you're not doing what you should be doing. So we want to make sure that we keep you all close, that we keep everyone engaged and everyone productive. So I can't thank you enough for those comments and the will that needs to be applied to achieve the goals that I believe we all want. So again, I just thank you, Sheila, for your participation at this point.
Madam Chair.
Jones, yes, I saw Councilman Miller first and then Councilwoman Simon.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, to Ms. Wright, I just want to say as one of 11 that I am totally committed to strong and bold action on an aggressive time frame, and that I encourage you not to shy away from making strong and out of the box recommendations. And I think as a council person and one of our county's leaders, that it's incumbent on me to be directly involved in this work, and I don't consider your committee to be my only source of information on this subject. Perhaps the most important, but I'm also looking to the result of the disparity study, the second round, which is being completed, and to other information as to how we can best move forward. And so I just want to assure you that I'll be watching the work that you do very, very closely, and will take your recommendation seriously. And we're going to get somewhere and make some really, really significant progress. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Miller, Councilwoman Simon.
Thank you so much. I have a question for all the panelists, but I'll wait till we're finished with our last and great candidate, Ms. Wright. I have a question. You indicated that you have to assess how to allocate resources, that there's no point, putting money into something that's obviously not working. And that's a challenge we have as a council with our health and human service funds. It's just overlapping and a lot of different tendons and spider webs. But what do you think is working? Does anything come to mind for you that seems to be working well with the county on the issues we're addressing today? And maybe the rest of the panelists can think about that too. But is there anything offhand that we're doing right and maybe we'd like to continue to support?
Well, I haven't had an opportunity. I was more engaged in this work when I was more in an intermediary role of connecting need to donor. And
Mm.
now I'm more in a role of aligned to a funder. And so in that space, I would, I don't want to misspeak, but what I will tell you is that historically, and this isn't, I know we're talking about the county, I'm really talking about more so the culture of government funding and philanthropic funding. When you see various efforts, when there's double down on efforts that haven't worked, and the measuring and the accountability and understanding the data points to retrieve out of those efforts to tell the story of what's working. So it's the process of decision-making around the funding. Listen, we're in our relationships in Cleveland and Northeast Ohio throughout this county is almost incestuous. We're also connected, right? So some of it is so clearly about relationships. I was just gonna be honest about that, right? It's really about relationships and who's able to get the funding, and we don't have to do a deep dive into that, but all I'm saying is there is a science behind this. And I think with more of our philanthropic partners who are now taking a harder line with an investment approach in how they allocate resources, they are looking for that data on the other side to say, this investment actually has a return. And I know it's a little different with funding from government, but I do think that that's something that we need to have kind of in our purview as we make decisions around resources, because at the end of the day, just speaking frankly, this is a time when we are considering issues of equity. It's easy to get into a mode of any organization or any effort or any program that comes about for support. We're going to allocate it to that simply because they use buzzwords around diversity or underrepresented people, right? We can't fall into those bags as well. And so I just think that there is a, I don't want to say a more business-like approach, but I think we can be more deliberate about how we allocate resources and the decision makings around that to make sure that we are tracking that what we're doing is effective and that we are getting the outcomes that we receive. Listen, if I come to the county for funding for a program or organization or a contract, and I'm not delivering, and there's no accountability on whether I'm delivering, that's a problem. And that's happening. So unfortunately, I don't want to take up too much more time. It's a lot easier for me to speak about what's not working and I don't want to point anybody out than what is working. But happy to work more in this space.
Great, thank you. Thanks a lot.
I know it's a long-winded way. And thank you all so much for hearing me out. And Chairwoman Brown, let me just say, you leading out in this effort made a lot of difference in the decision to allocate time to do this. So we are ever thrilled and supportive and happy with your leadership. So I bet it's taken to heart and was given a lot of consideration in decisions to be a part of this. So I just wanted you to know that.
I appreciate that very much, Ms. Councilwoman Simons, do you have any additional questions?
To the whole panel, but I'll wait till there's a minute to do that.
Well, I think if there are no more questions for Ms. Wright, this would be the appropriate time. I know that we have exceeded the normal window, so we may have lost some of our participants, just so that you are aware. But if you have an additional question, I would yield the floor to you.
Thank you. And I know we're short on time. And first, I just want to thank everybody. This is a great panel and the time is right. It's interesting that this was a vision of two of my colleagues when we started the new government, and it really didn't take off until now, and it just seems so timely and expansive than what I think was originally even envisioned. So I'm really support this body, and thank you so much. The question that I have for the group that's left is, do you have thoughts on environmental justice? And I haven't heard that at all today, about how there's a disproportionate impact on poorer and African-American communities with clean water, clean air, and how that intersects with healthcare. I wanted to see if anybody had any thoughts. I know Senator Booker has legislation in the Senate about this, and how it's important. It's not as acute, in front of us right now, but in fact, it's part of the marathon that Councilman Jones referenced.
Thank you for that question, Ms. Simon. I'm going to start with Sheila Wright. We're going to go in reverse order this time. So if you do have a comment, I'll state your name and you can give us your feedback. If not, if you're on the call, we'll ask you for your feedback. So Ms. Wright.
Yes, thank you. And Councilwoman Simon, thank you so much for that important question. Yes, I'm very supportive of environmental justice. And I would say one of the issues that we have been really trying to raise awareness about and ring the alarm about as is with respect to our water here locally. As you are all aware, we are under a consent decree, at least we were under the EPA for water treatment. We're all aware of that. And I think we were given, if anyone remembers the language of that agreement, 30 years to bring our water treatment to a particular percentage. And the price point for that bill was about $3 billion. And if you think of the bell curve that we learned about in high school, we are ramping up on the front side of that curve. And what that means is, if you talk to the constituents of Cuyahoga County, if you just listen to their conversations, you will hear a lot of people talking about their water bills going up. And while that's an issue around economics, it ties to what the EPA put us under a consent decree for. And what is happening is the cost to treat our water, because of the technology and contracts used for that, is being translated over into our residents. And if you look at residents who are facing the loss of their homes right now, if you go to the website, look at the prosecutor's office, look at what they're facing, it is around their water bills. And that is largely attributed to the cost in treating this water. And there's an opportunity for us to leverage the metro parks for green technology to do this. That would be at a lower cost. So this has been a long-standing issue that our office and my colleagues have worked on and have been trying to raise awareness. But as always, there's always a political component to it. But I think if we consider the issues around environmental justice, particularly water, fresh water, our treatment of our water, there's so many issues of equity and economics that touch that. I would love an opportunity to speak more about that issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wright. It looks like if we're going in reverse order based on the individuals who still are on the call, Ms. Lee, if you have a comment, I would welcome you to share your remarks.
Well, this is an issue that the Cleveland Foundation is really working on. Our program program manager for the environment, Stephen Love, is very involved working with the Cleveland Water Alliance, as well as the larger organizations across the state, and working with the coalition to really look at how this impacts us, not only economically, but again, as an environmental issue in the neighborhoods, just like, with this about safe places and parks and recreation and creating those kind of environments in our community, again, that, is a part of health. Basically, and social determinants to health. But it's something we actually take seriously. It's an agenda item at the foundation. and working with broad coalitions to really work on this issue. And again, the systemic issues that lie beneath all of these continue to affect us. And again, once we address racism and acknowledge that it exists in every one of these systems, I think we can move past that and get to the real issues to move these forward for our community.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. Mr. Mcshepherd, if you have any comments, the floor is yours.
Sure. Councilwoman Simon, I appreciate the question as well. I didn't get a chance to talk about another passion of mine, which is I'm the co-founder of the Red Grain Partnership, which is an urban farm in the city's Lower Kinsman neighborhood. We're celebrating our 10th anniversary at that site this year. We started out with 1.3 acres in an area that was an illegal dump known as the Forgotten Triangle. And today we've assembled 15 acres of land that we've repurposed for not only urban agriculture purposes, but also for recreational purposes. We've hosted 5 weddings at the location, in addition to a community festival last year that drew 6,000 people on 82nd and Kinsman. I mean, that doesn't happen every day, right? But this past year, we have gotten very involved in the environmental space. One case being, we've been very involved with many partners on the whole Cleveland Tree Coalition, which I know had to be put on hold because of COVID, but we were hoping to be a part of the team that would be responsible for planting 36,000 trees per year over a 10-year period to try to reforest the forest city. And we worked with the county's sustainability director on this, and even the county executive. We were ready to go full steam ahead with that effort. And that's important because in urban core neighborhoods in particular, you have what's known as the heat island effect. So many communities don't have trees, so you have, it's been proven and documented that certain neighborhoods have 10 to 15 higher degree temperatures on hot days because they don't have the tree canopy that suburban and other communities have. So that's why we thought it was important for us to get involved. We're actually starting a small tree nursery on our farm site to try to get a bit more involved in the tree piece. And finally, we, again, at that farm, hosted a national conference chaired by a fellow out of Boulder, Colorado, named Brett Kincairn. He started a collective effort called the Carbon Drawdown Initiative, which is basically looking at ways of drawing carbon out of the atmosphere to deal with global warming. And all the experts say that the one proven method to make that happen, that all the global scientists agree on, is carbon drawdown in natural environments. So forests, farms, trees, bushes, those kinds of things. So we have been trying to be a leader in that regard, and I want to see more work take place in that space as well. So it's a critical issue, something that I'm very involved with. I know many on the call are very involved with as well, and would like to see that lifted up in this work as well.
Continuing in reverse order, Phyllis Seven Harris, you would be next if you have any comments you'd like to share on this matter.
I'm learning a lot. I, for this morning, listened to WCPN where they talked about the issues around water, and I couldn't get out of my car in terms of like, you know, like here we are, you know, like if you look at it, I think India said it, you know, if we can get to really confronting racism and looking at equity, we're going to get to these issues as well. And it's really hard because, you know, there's so many. And so I'll go back to what I said earlier, the interconnectedness of all of these isms. Let's get racism. That's the one that we're most uncomfortable with, that we all feel the impacts of through these other issues. And I'm learning more about environmental justice. And so what I would bring, I guess, is you know, the desire to become a scholar to work toward justice around these issues, along with combating racism.
Thank you, Ms. Harris. Dr. Gullit, you would be next if you have any questions or, I'm sorry, comments relative to Councilwoman Simon's question.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought it up. So, issues of inequities are intimately tied to climate change. And I think there is no better time to begin talking about what this means for future pandemics. I mean, I think understanding the role of climate change in novel viruses and in pandemic risks is really, really big, but the key is tying it to equity. And so we do an exercise with the first year medical students, which actually will be August 11th this year, where we actually teach them to do systems maps around climate change and the impact on people and on communities. And it really forces people to think beyond their preconceived notions and often polarized views driven by politics, and actually look at the facts around data and the facts around climate change and the facts around how those impact the individual's health, but also the health of families and communities, and particularly communities of color, who, when you layer on other levels of systemic injustice, is really very profound health effects. So it's really critical, and I think certainly an important piece of whatever our group decides to tackle first, second, third, or throughout the time we're together, but a really important piece for us to keep in mind, and very tightly tied to all the issues we've discussed today.
Thank you, Dr. Gullit. I believe Habiba Rashid Grimes is on the call. If you'd like to share your comments relative to Councilwoman Simon's question, you have the floor.
I also appreciate the question. I agree with much of what's been said. This issue is one that requires a multidisciplinary address and perspective. It has multi-system impacts or causes, and elevating and shining the light on racism and how it's created the conditions for environmental injustice and inequities feels of utter importance. When we look at health outcomes for children and adults, there are the rates of asthma, atopic dermatitis, and other allergies, lead exposure, it feeds into other areas of outcomes that we are trying to influence. And so there's really an urgency necessary to us kind of figuring out how these issues interweave. And I believe Phyllis mentioned that the learning curve exists for all of us within our different sectors and disciplines, so that we understand how these things interweave together and design the solutions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Grimes. Reverend Chalker, if you would like to offer any comments on this subject, you have the floor.
Yes, I just a specific area where we might do an investigation of how people benefit or how we are restricting folk would be to just take a look again about how we use the Port of Cleveland, how we are developing or not, or thinking about what we might do with Burke Lakefront, how that whole property, how the health of our city is impacted, or a group of people not supported because of the way that's used, and access and restrictions. I think that might be a specific thing of out of the box thinking about how our environment would impact our city and our county.
Thank you very much, Reverend Chalker. And finally, Mr. Cavanis, you have the last word on this question.
Well, thank you, Councilwoman, for the question. Don't want to sort of repeat what others said. Definitely echo some positions and comments from my colleagues. But I guess what I'll say is that as I go into this work, I certainly have to recognize that there's a lot of intersections with these issues. And so environmental justice is definitely critical, not only for us today, but for our generations to come. And sort of going back to what Ms. Wright said about sort of the cost of doing that, it is costly. And I think that we have to understand what that cost looks like for our residents. But I just urge this group and the county to sort of evaluate the cost benefit. If we don't act now, then what do our future generations have that we leave them, right? And so I do appreciate sort of the statements and the positions that the county has taken thus far that have been bold, and I just urge everyone that we have action that's bold, and so that cuts across all of the issues. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Cavanis. Councilwoman Simon, did you have any additional questions, comments, or concerns on this matter?
No, thank you so much for letting me ask the question, and I appreciate everybody working together to shine light. And it is intersectionality, and we're here as a lens from racism and how it impacts all these institutions, and the environmental justice is a piece of it. So it's great, and I look forward to working alongside of you. Thank you.
Very welcome. With that said, if there are no additional questions, comments, or concerns, I just want to bring before this committee. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Councilwoman Conway, you've been so quiet today. Hey.
No, I've been listening. Sometimes you just need to sit back and listen.
You have the floor.
Well, systematic racism, as it was stated on several fronts, is embedded in the core of our society. And I just want to say, each of you sit in an influential position to make change. I'm going to say that again. Each of you sit in an influential position to make change. I'm going to say it one more time so it will sink in. Each of you sit in an influential position to make change. We're the legislators. You have the administration on the line. We need society. We need you to make a difference in this racism, systematic racism, as well as equity. I've been pushing for equity, like my colleague stated earlier. So I enjoyed really sitting back and listening to each of you and what your top priorities were going to be, because it is big. This is huge undertaking. And so I'm hoping that you'll come to a consensus of which ones you will prioritize and start to work on first. And I think I heard some, what was this? Getting to the root of systematic structural racism. So I heard that as a common theme and from many of you. But I want to thank each of you for your willingness to serve. Your vision, as stated by Marsha Makabe, must be clear and precise. The direction the Citizens Advisory Committee takes will set the tone of how Cuyahoga County will move forward with the work of eradicating systematic racism. So I just want to look forward to each of you providing what you will provide to eliminate racism and to move the ball forward for equity, which I have pushed for, and Councilwoman Chantel Brown has pushed for racism, as well as my colleague, Councilman Miller, has pushed for equity. It all interrelates, it all ties in, and Black and Brown communities, particularly in those communities we know or have been set aside. So it looks very well that the administration has picked top people in this community of all races, all backgrounds, all religions, to really hone in and bring us what you can make, what you can add to this administration, as well as county council, and what we want to see our future Cuyahoga County to be. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Councilwoman Conwell. And again, I want to echo the sentiments that this work did not start with me. It did not start with the First Year Cleveland. This has been longstanding work, and this body was actually established in 2012. So we're finally putting it into action. And I think one of the things that I heard relative to getting this work done is that it's going to require resources and staff. So I am challenging the administration. And if you can let us know, Ms. Pomerantz, how many individuals you are prepared to lend to this committee. I think this work is going to require more than one person. And in addition to that, I would like to also suggest that we make an amendment to the legislation. While I am very pleased, I must say, very pleased with the county executive selection, I would like to make an amendment to add 2 more individuals to this body. One specifically should be, I believe, an individual that is an employee of Cuyahoga County to at least work as a voting member to address some of the things that we deal with internally in our organization. perhaps 2. I'm open to discussing this with my colleagues if we should require that those individuals to both be employees. But I think it's critical to the work, and these individuals should be separate and apart from the ones who will be helping staff. I'm not looking for these individuals to be staff. I'm looking for them to be active, participating members of this body. I also understand you would like to convene them on August 1st. Is that correct, Director Pomerantz?
Madam Chair, we would like to get the external advisory group together as soon as possible. I don't have a date on August 1st yet, but that was one of the reasons I wanted to request a second reading suspension so that this team has enough time to get started and that we can have a meeting set up as soon as possible.
Okay, so are there any objections to the request to amend to add 2 more people on the committee that would be employees of Cuyahoga County? If there are no objections, may I have a second?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'd just like to make a practical comment that what we have here is a resolution. And I would think that in addition to amending the resolution, we would also have to go back and amend the ordinance, which establishes the advisory committee and expand its membership.
Okay, thank you for that. And on that point, I will ask if our council policy analyst, Mr. McAleer, will chime in on this one for me, as I think you understand the direction that I would like to proceed. And thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. McAleer, if you are on the line and you are available to address this request for me.
I am, Chairwoman. Yes, Councilman Miller's correct. I think we should probably leave this legislation as is and introduce legislation in a separate county code, a separate ordinance to amend the county code to expand from 15 to 17, with the 2 being county employees. So that would just be a separate legislation if that's okay with your approach, but I think we need to do it through the ordinance.
Okay, absolutely. We want to do things decent and in order, so I apologize for that, but I would like to be able to definitely set aside some staff for this body to be able to get to doing the work that is obviously needed. And it might, I'm not sure if we could even, since this is somewhat relative to the disparate impacts relative to COVID-19, I'm not sure if we would be able to utilize some of the CARES money to staff this body, but those are some things I want to put out before the public and this body to demonstrate to you our real commitment to providing you with the tools and the staff that you need to be able to get this work done effectively, efficiently, and right away. So with that being said, I will
one thing.
Yes, go ahead.
We can work with Jean and maybe get it on for Tuesday's agenda because it's an easy ordinance to do. So we'll work with her to see if we can get under her timeline for the agenda. But we'll try to get that right away.
Okay, thank you very much. So I will rescind my motion to amend the legislation, and I will respectfully move forward with a motion to move this forward to the full body of the council under second reading suspension. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, it's been properly moved and second. If there's no further discussion, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, no one is opposed. So I want to just again reiterate all of my council colleagues' comments as it relates to getting this work done. I thank everyone for their participation and sticking it out. This meeting went a lot longer than we allotted the time for, but your time commitment and sticking through the call really is demonstrative of the commitment that you are willing to give this task, which is a very big lift. So thank you very much. If there's no miscellaneous business, I move to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, thank you all. Have a wonderful day. All right, this meeting is adjourned.
Bye.